Okay, everyone, so here we are back at the Jrock ONSEN. I'm your host, Mazu, joined with host Nexus.
Hello.
And host Sis.
Yo.
And special guest MBT.
Burp, burp. Burp, burp.
Alright, so today we're gonna talk about then versus now. So talking about Jrock, Visual-kei, not just the music itself, but maybe even the community, you know, how things have changed, how easy it is to access now, or how not easy it was to access back then, those kinds of things. So, for myself, personally, to start it off, I'll say that I feel that in the last few years, especially, things have started in a trend where like hardcore type music and heavier sounds are getting more and more popular. I don't know if you guys really agree with that though, but I feel like that's more the way things are going.
What time frame was it?
You know,
I feel like it started. Well, it did. I'm not gonna say it started somewhere, but for me, it started with Deluhi, and then I saw bands like.
Dude, Deluhi is like super late into that wave.
I mean,
wait, you guys are talking about the time frame that we're gonna discuss about, and I guess that's around where VK started, I guess, and to current time.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that would be a set time frame around VK. Maybe not necessarily starting. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing.
It's hard to pinpoint when the VK actually started, honestly. Or how would I put it? When the Japanese musicians appropriated the American glam rock and accidentally created Visual-kei.
Yeah, well, it's around that time. I mean, when people started to dress up and do more kind of makeup, kind of crazy looks.
But Maz, when you mean heavier, you mean like Deviloof kind of stuff, right?
Not necessarily Deviloof, because Deviloof, in my personal opinion, kind of mixes a bit of like grindcore type elements into their music. But I'm talking
Deviloof is more like they added Visual-kei to grindcore.
Yeah, they feel less Visual-kei and more like a grindcore band. But I'm talking like more like the. I don't want to say necessarily metalcore, but more hardcore type scene, like Cold Rain or Crystal Lake, and there's like 3 or 4 bands like that are really popular right now. Like Sim falls into it too. Sim's I give Sim a pass on being like straight up hardcore because of their like weird reggae mix that they throw in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's
I think it's
Hone Your Sense, I think sometimes a little bit too.
Hone Your Sense is really good.
They're really good.
But the thing you're mentioning, I think the kind of like spurt of heavy bands getting more popular and also becoming more trendy. I think it's also because technology has evolved to allow them to produce that kind of sound.
Well, also there's like, obviously foreign bands sometimes lead by example, and so they get the influence from there.
Yeah. I mean, because like Nexus said, Visual-kei, in a way you could say, is the appropriation of glam rock. So for a while, that was, you know, really popular here in the States and globally. It was all about glam rock, you know, Motley Crue and stuff like that. Like if you see interviews with a lot of bands, like, oh, who's your inspiration? A lot of times they'll say Motley Crue or like Metallica, or something, bands that everyone knows. But
if I don't remember,
like every second interview, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember correctly, in the Hoshiko interview that we had, ex-Japan were like big fans of Motley Crue.
Yeah. So there's that, and you see that with stuff in the past, but then present day, I still see a lot of them citing the same artists, but you know, now and then there's different stuff. But you know, living here in the States, or when I did live in the States, around like I want to say 2007, 8, 9, 10, like that chunk of time, the hardcore scene was like totally on the rise. And it's almost like now it's finally hitting here in Japan. And now we're starting to see more bands kind of gravitate towards that style.
Yeah. But I don't actually know how big it is in Japan. I know it's popular, but like in comparison to, I don't know, pop. Okay, well, I can start with, let's talk about some of the Vocaloid scene. Because in the past, I mean, I guess it started out with more kind of poppy music, but then people started kind of like trying to, this goes back to the stuff that I talked about technology, because people were making music at home now, which was, I don't know, early 2000 maybe. And because they had access to that kind of technology, they were also experimenting on how they could produce like scream vocals with Vocaloid, and that's how like the what's it called, scream, I forgot the term, but
I genuinely didn't know that you could produce scream vocals.
Yeah,
Scream
Five, what? I don't know.
no, it's like wait, Vocaloid scream.
Utsu-P, I don't know if he's the first one to do it, but he's definitely one of the pioneers of it. Like, he's the one who's probably the most famous for it. And what they do is from what I've heard, is you take the Vocaloid and you put them on the whisper setting, and then you just fucking throw the gain up there, and then you get a scream.
Huh.
Yeah, it's basically like that, and like using that kind of like tone, you get a really more kind of like harsher kind of sound.
Yeah.
And that's how they started with that kind of like metal, like Hatsune Miku trend. But I don't see that as much anymore. So in that sense, in the Vocaloid scene, I guess it kind of died down, though it still exists.
Yeah, with Utsu-P in particular, he does have some more popular stuff now, but the screams either aren't used at all or just not used as much. Like, recently, what was it? You went to like Miku Expo in Europe or something, and they played one of his songs for her live show.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's no screams in that one.
There are screams. There's like a breakdown part, but they aren't as prominent anymore. It's because before it was more like scream 90% of the song, but then it's like 10% clean vocals maybe, or other kind of vocals. But now it's kind of like inverted. It's more used as an accent or a way to emphasize the song.
Yeah, so
when
like
did Vocaloids become widespread?
Oh,
God,
I actually don't have a good answer to that.
I feel like when I got into J music, I immediately knew about Vocaloid. Like, just in like the foresight, it was like I can't even explain how I even got to know Vocaloid. So that's interesting.
I mean, to be honest, I didn't really like the Vocaloid sound at the beginning, but it's kind of like I've gotten used to it, so it doesn't sound necessarily bad to me anymore, but it doesn't sound as good as, I mean, real vocals.
It's the same as me,
Hatsune Miku is like your thing, right? Now you're admitting that you actually don't like Vocaloid sounds.
I like what Hatsune Miku has allowed the world to, how the world is able to connect together.
Yeah.
Like Hatsune Miku is a medium that has brought people together and also created a lot of great artists.
So Hatsune Miku is the freaking messiah, and you respect the religion she's created.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
That's a good way to put it.
Honestly, kinda. It sounds very outlandish, but it's a good comparison.
Yeah. You're just praising yourself now.
Praise Hatsune Miku.
I still, from time to time, listen to songs of like Vocaloid songs, and I'm like, but compared to, I would say, quite a few years ago, I am definitely more accepting of it now. Like, I can definitely just listen to it rather than be like, oh, I don't really like it. And that's because I've discovered artists that blend genres rather than do the whole go down the pop route and that's it. And so when I heard, I can't remember the Utsu-P song during the live, I was like, oh, like, this is like totally my thing. I knew like there were metal bands who had Vocaloid as the main vocalist, but it was always not my kind of metal that I was into. So yeah, it's cool that it's done so much.
But the song that you heard at the Hatsune Miku concert, that was actually mild compared to his older work.
Yeah.
Yeah, the song I always think of when I think of Utsu-P is probably Psychokinesis.
I think a lot of people think of shit. I forgot the song.
Well, he's definitely got, you know, much harsher stuff than that. I mean, even out here there's an arcade game called Tunithim, and it's in every arcade. It's really popular, and it's got one of his songs, and it's a lot more harsh than what I heard in that live performance. But going back to talking about technology, that I think does have a big role in everything too, because if you look at the history of Western music, even like with bands like Run DMC and kind of hip-hop artists in the past, it wasn't until DJ equipment became a little more widely available that these bands started to form and create their new style of music for that era.
YouTube got better.
Yeah, YouTube definitely.
For 80p. For 80.
Imagine way back when, in like 2002, once the internet was already a thing, so some people in the West knew about Japanese music but had to fish out literally everything and anything from really obscure bits on the internet, and then YouTube became a thing, and suddenly it was so easily accessible. And then YouTube became too much of a thing, and they started copyright claiming everything.
I mean, at that time, you could only put like 10 songs on your MP3 player.
Yeah, true. That's
true.
very true. Yeah. I guess what YouTube has also done is that record labels have learned how to utilize it to the best of their ability. With like
I don't know, man. That's a very bold claim.
It's still like growing, but it is. I think it's as best as it was. If I was comparing this to maybe 10 years ago, or it wasn't, it was pretty bad. Like you would have an official band YouTube.
Wait, are you talking about YouTube or the actual people using it though?
But I'm talking about both, really. Like you have the official YouTube, and then when you have the official YouTube, people could upload their music video or whatnot. And before you couldn't have that, you would get somebody illegally uploading something for all to see. And by making it official,
but you're talking about that it's a lot better now because bands upload their own videos officially, so they actually stay up there. Is that what you're saying?
But I'm also saying that it's also easier it will get popular that way, I believe.
Yeah, but also since it's way more watched now and way more moderated, if the band doesn't choose to share it themselves, if you share it illegally, it gets taken down. So it's also becoming like a curated experience where many things are, fortunately, that's great, available for free, but also the things that used to be so commonly shared, like pretty much illegally, are not really a thing anymore because it's way harder to get them out there because everything gets taken down, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, even earlier on, things were getting taken down. So yeah, it's good that we have this official YouTube now and whatnot.
Yeah, that's definitely something too. But talking about YouTube and everything, that's definitely changed the scene today. I mean, YouTube was a part of it probably when some of us got started, and it was a lot easier to find shit back then because it was all uploaded without anyone's permission. But
YouTube was a lawless wasteland in like 2006.
Yeah. Well, the comment section wasn't as bad as it is today. But that's another thing too, talking about the role of technology. Maybe, you know, especially with the hardcore stuff being more popular, what we're seeing is the bands that people tend to listen to are the ones that are easier to find. And the ones that are easier to find are the ones that are best at utilizing, you know, social media, YouTube, Twitter, getting their name out there. And a lot of times, whatever trend they're following, it becomes the trend.
Yeah, I think you're hitting something there, because I've been thinking that the bands that get more popular in the West are the Japanese hardcore bands, because they realize that technically a Western style. It's not something so inherently Japanese as Visual-kei. And so they like get more into making their shit more accessible to the Western audience. So their popularity is literally inherently tied to the spread of technology and shit like YouTube and Spotify and stuff like that. Because they want to reach the Western audience because of their Western style, and they just utilize the tools better.
But you have like Crossfade, for example. They tour like overseas more than they tour Japan because they know their audience.
But I think they also hit it at the right time, at right place at the right time, because then because I remember I went to their first gig in the UK, and then from then they played with like bands like Bring Me the Horizon, from Memphis Mayfire, I think, a whole load of like bands that would like in their genre, and because they played with other like Western bands, people started realizing, oh shit, like Japanese metalcore, this is brilliant. And then from Crossfade, I think like Crossfade is kind of like a pioneer in some ways, because that led to like bands like Crystal Lake coming over, Cold Rain.
I think you're right.
Yeah, but NBT, kind of on what you said, it's not because they tour that they're popular. It's because they're popular that they get to tour.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it does help you bring in a few new people when you tour. And you know, word of mouth spreads a little more. Some people show up to the show and then they're like, okay, I can get into this. Like, I know for sure when I've been to some shows, there's people there who are clearly not into Japanese bands, but they're like, yeah, I go to every show at this live house or whatever. It's not because they tour that they're big, but it's because they're big that they tour.
Wait, can you evolve on explain more about the part about the person who go to all the gigs at the venue?
It's not necessarily the venue, but like, for example, a lot of the shows I went to in the past were in Los Angeles, and there were people there who, like, in line and stuff, you'd talk to people. There was more than one occasion I'd be like, oh, so, you know, are you a fan of this band or whatever? Like, nah, I've never heard of them, but my friend recommended I go, and it's here. I got nothing to do. It's Saturday night. So it does happen.
It's literally happened to me before that I, like, came to a venue and some, like, older metalheads were there that looked extraordinarily out of place at a Japanese band. And they were just like, yeah, we come here often, and we don't really know what this is. We're just here because we come here.
Wait, so they're just there to drink beer or what?
Yeah, I mean, they know that it's a metal band. Maybe they, like, you know, they keep up with that venue or the venues in town, and they know that a metal band is going to be playing. They don't necessarily know what metal band, but they know that, I'm into metal. You know, maybe they saw, like, a PV or two. Like, for me, it's always Deer on Grey that I go to. Maybe they saw, like, a PV or two, and they're like, okay, they're moderately heavy. Maybe I'll go. And then they go.
I might enjoy this.
And they're like, wow,
it's an interesting way to kind of discover and consume music, because you do it in real life rather than behind a computer.
Yeah, exactly.
My father
That's
does
kind of
this.
the old school way.
He literally just goes see shit, and if he likes it, then he, like, follows the band. But
did you say he literally go and see shit? Literally
you know what I mean.
Yeah, I would say my dad's the same way. Like, he'll go to a show with, like, one band that he's known for, like, a year or so. And then he comes back home with, like, a ton of CDs. And, like, what happened? Yeah. He's like, these other bands were great.
Yeah, I think that even when I went to Durham Grey in February, like, I spoke to, I think it was a couple, and they were like, oh, we've never heard this band before, but we thought we'd come, and, like, it's amazing, like, Durham Grey are amazing. And I was like, oh shit, so that stuff still, like, it still happens now, and that's cool.
I think it's a lot rarer now, and I think, you know, especially talking about the past versus now, back then it was more common. And that's probably why it was so much harder for Japanese bands to get discovered out here, because it's not really easy to just get a fucking tour out here.
I think it's also, like, a sense of othering. So, like, oh, they're Japanese bands, but are they as good as the Western bands, you know? And I think because of bands like Crossfaith and Crystal Lake and whatever, they've proved their worth, you know? And now they're like, oh, like, we can bring these guys on tour and it'll be, like, fine, you know?
You mean that Japan has gotten a better image with time, and now they're more open to bringing Japanese bands.
I guess.
I think they proved their worth as a metal band.
Are you talking about specific band or like in general Japanese bands? That's what I'm more getting at.
I'm talking about in general, I think. Yeah.
But no matter what Sis is talking about, it definitely happened in general.
It did happen in general, but in a lot of ways it kind of didn't. Because if you think about it,
what's the twist?
If you think about it, if you ask a random person on the street if they know any Japanese bands in the States, who do you think they'll say?
Baby metal.
Exactly. I'm not saying.
Is baby metal really that prominent in? I know
they were on late night TV. They're everything now. Like for the normies, they're everything now. But nothing against baby metal. You know, obviously they are good and they have legitimate artists behind them. They wouldn't be where they are if they weren't. But is that really the vision of Jrock and Visual-kei that you think everyone should see and be like, yeah, that's what Jrock is. That's what Visual-kei is.
What about band-maid though?
Ooh. What about him?
Nobody fucking knows what band-maid is.
Wait, hold up. I do, but like
band-maid are top.
Of course you do, because you're in the scene. I mean, normies.
I mean, it's weird that is actually, because they're definitely not the same band, but yeah, I can't really. It's hard to explain.
Everyone and their mother knows what BTS is, but when it comes to Japan, everyone only knows baby metal.
But that's the thing, though. If you let's say you put on a random video for someone, and you were like, guess what country this band is from, and you played band-maid, they'd be like, oh, they're Japanese, like immediately, because they'd see a bunch of girls playing metal music. Yeah. But if you put on Cold Rain or something, they'd be like, I don't know, man, they sound they're from California. They wouldn't immediately jump to be like, oh, that's
Masato
Japanese metal.
Yeah, but Masato is Hafu, so.
Yeah.
But his English is near perfect. That's the thing.
Yeah. And also when he
but there's
bleaches
no
his
reason
hair,
that
he looks pretty like not that Japanese anymore too.
But hey, here's the thing: we keep going back to the distinction of Japanese music and Western music, even for Japanese bands, because there are some Japanese bands that play Japanese music, and there are some Japanese bands that play Western music, and I guarantee that everyone can pinpoint which is which. And should it be that way?
Well, I don't know where Mazo was going with it, but I mean I think it's easy to distinguish like if it's a Japanese or if it's a Western band.
Yeah, I think so too.
I mean.
Could you distinguish easily that Crossfade is a Japanese band? I couldn't.
I mean, by the sound, you mean only by the
sound? I couldn't. By looks, I also couldn't. They could be American.
They could be American.
Colors.
There are many Asian people in America.
Because I got into them early on, yes, definitely. But now, I'm not entirely sure. It'd be interesting to see an outsider's look into that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I feel.
This podcast is steadily happening to become Western versus Eastern music instead.
I feel like we don't have the same perception about the people you're trying to talk about, which is the normies, as you call them. It's hard to kind of get that.
I don't know any normies. I don't like them. I don't know what they think about shit.
Why do you talk like you know?
I mean, I've generally observed some things, but I don't really talk about too many normies, except maybe my family.
It's so funny that I call your family normies. Stop talking to me, Mom. You're a normie.
My father likes metal, but that's about it. But the rest of my family are fucking normies.
But do you guys want to bring up any specific field that you've been involved in regarding this topic of old and current?
What do you mean field?
So I was talking about Vocaloid, for example.
I've always
so how Vocaloid has changed over time. Yeah. I mean from the beginning I was talking more about the heavier type of band, And over time, I feel like we're getting more of them, but at the same time, more of them are starting to sound a lot more Western in the like post-hardcore type scene, where in the past, like even when it was mostly still Visual-kei bands doing heavier stuff, it was a lot of them kind of not copying, but being inspired by some of the heavier stuff by Jrock, starting with like the Ouroboros era. Like take a band like Vajra. You know, a lot of their songs, they had like the same tune essentially as some of Deer's songs, but it was a little muddier and darker sounding. And then we had Zodiac way back when Ice was Arrows. Because Zodiac was so good. They were so good. You know, but they're one of the heavier bands that was around back then, and they weren't like a hardcore sound. They were just fucking brutal. Like, they were great. And you look at the more Visual-kei kind of glam kind of stuff still, and you had the virtuoso guitarists like Leda and stuff like that. So there was different bits of it, but it never really sounded the way this hardcore stuff sounds today. It was more...
Now that you mention all this kind of stuff, I kind of get a better idea of what you were talking about, because even with a lot of Visual-kei bands, they have started to take more of the kind of Western sound that you're talking about, like let's say Gent. That has been so much more popular now in the Visual-kei bands.
Years. Yeah, that has.
Yeah,
Gent in general is super popular.
Far East Design.
Leather. Yeah, we're going back to Leather.
There's just all these elements. Like you can even hear it in bands that songs that are not intentionally degent, but they've got a degenti part, and you're like, oh yeah, I see what you're doing there, you know.
I'm buying what you're selling.
It's the Japanese guitarist, so the wailing power metal guitar, and now it's everywhere.
Yeah, the wailing power metal guitar. That was one of the things that, like, with Japanese rock in general, when I first started getting into it, there weren't too many wailing power metal guitars, and personally, it's not a sound that I like.
I love that sound, honestly.
Depends how it's
Sorry, I
done.
just had to say it.
Yeah, no, definitely people like it. I mean, there's a reason it's so popular and has been around for decades, but it's not something I like.
It's also one of the more significant signs that you see is that there's a specific brand that does this kind of like gent guitars, and that's the Swedish brand called Strandberg. And when you see that guitar, it's very distinct.
You mean here?
Sorry?
You mean here the guitar?
No.
He's talking about the actual guitar body style and everything. The manufacturer.
Exactly. So the guitar body style, I don't know if it's patented or anything like that, but it's very distinct body shape, and it's usually, I think it's always headless too. So you don't have this weird thing that sticks out on the guitar.
Weird thing. Every other guitar has a fucking head, but now the head is the weird thing.
That's on like all guitars.
It sounds that was badly worded for me.
It doesn't have a head, so you don't have this weird thing like a head sticking out of the top.
How to tell that NBT is a drummer? You know, this weird thing on the guitar.
Doulahan over here telling us how guitars are supposed to look.
But I guess I got so used to headless guitars, but that guitar is very popular now in Japan, and a lot of
what the fuck a headless guitar is.
Oh, you don't know that? Okay, so it's basically.
I don't.
You know the thing that you.
That looks fucking. How does that work?
Let me explain how it looks.
Their guitars use a headless guitar.
I don't care about that band. I care about
Fuck off, dude. Riot is such a good song.
How do you tune it?
At the bass,
so,
bridge.
On regular guitars, you have like a head that sticks out, and that's where you can tune the guitar.
Yes.
So you can tune it with your hand, your fingers, and you just tighten the screws. But headless guitars don't have that. You have to use like a what do you call it?
Is it an Allen wrench?
Yeah, well, it's a tool. I don't know the name of it.
Can't still tune them.
I know, I can see.
You're not allowed to tune them. You get it, and it's tuned at the factory, and once it's out of tune, fuck it.
Yeah, you have to buy a new guitar. But they're super expensive though. Like I think the cheapest one are around maybe $2,500. That's like a very cheap version.
Yeah.
Okay, today is the first time I've seen a headless guitar, and I have to say
so
that
shocked.
I do not like this. I do not like this. The head of the guitar is part of the appeal of the guitar.
It's weird at first, but then you look at it more, you're like, oh, you know what, this actually works, you know?
Yeah, I think you're so comfortable.
Yeah.
You're so used to seeing the head there. That's the thing.
And I wasn't.
You can make the head pretty and work with the rest of the guitar.
What do you want a flower up there?
You know what?
I
Sure.
think the main point really is that more people saw bands like, I guess, Pliny and I can't remember the other one, but but then they were like, oh, you know, we can use it as well. And even later has one now.
Yeah, he's sponsored by the brand too. So
and yeah, more bands are just Japanese bands are using it now. So
We're fucking off topic again.
Yeah, extremely. But it is different elements of different things that different artists are taking in different directions, and it is a change in the genres and the style of Japanese music now compared to then.
yeah, you see Gazette use gent as well.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that band.
It's your favorite band, man.
Yeah, they definitely do.
Like every time somebody brings up a band, I'm like, what the fuck? I've never heard of that in my life. Both NBT and Mazo have mentioned and name dropped like 10 bands.
You don't know Zodiac?
Nope, I have never
Okay.
heard of Zodiac in my life.
Okay,
Good.
I got some stuff you gotta listen to, bro.
Dude, I need to listen to.
You gotta let go, man. Zodiac is gone.
Dude, they're on indefinite hiatus, okay? The website says indefinite hiatus.
How do they
There's like, have you actually known that Malice Miser, they never broke up? They have actually been on hiatus since 2001, except it's 2020, and they are probably never getting off the hiatus.
They did have like one-off performances
Exactly.
like, last year.
Yeah,
so,
they do have
you know?
like one performance a year, but does that
they-
count?
What do you mean it doesn't count? What kind of
shows that
bullshit
you're
is
alive,
that?
man.
Does it really
It
count?
counts.
They've done it for the 20th anniversary, I believe. So yeah.
No, it's not just the 20th anniversary. They literally do it every summer, but I still don't think it counts.
Why do they do it during summer? Why is it during summer? I mean, they're wearing
have no
so much
idea.
clothes.
Well,
Mazo,
it's for the
look,
makeup
But there is
sponsors.
such a valid point, and I have been thinking about that for years because it's Malice Miser specifically, and why the fuck would you want to do a show in summer in that get-up?
Yeah.
I know. I don't know where we've gone with this anyway.
We're not going anywhere. We're totally off topic.
Okay.
All right, well,
This is getting cut out. Just
get
say
the
anything you want.
We get the point. I think the bottom line.
What point?
The bottom line is shit is changing.
Yes.
Things continue to change. Back then, we had a lot more of a glam type of influence in the heavier stuff. Today, we're starting to see more hardcore, post-hardcore type stuff. And then, you know, we have the outliers that are just taking it in a totally different direction, just going like super fucking heavy with it. And then you have, even in like the lighter, more rock type scene, you have people taking it in other directions. You got TK, Rin Toshite Shigure, they're doing their thing, totally different from anyone else. I mean, you got Toriko, they're doing their thing, their math rock thing, totally different from anyone else.
Trick out.
Math rock? Like math?
Oh,
Yeah, they do
I don't
math
want to
on
explain
stage.
math rock to you
Yeah.
right now.
It's
Okay.
yeah. You won't understand it if you listen to it.
It's a very extremely technical style of playing rock and roll.
Wait, let me ask you this, Mazo. Do you think that the post-hardcore sound has become dominant, though?
I think in the heavier scene, it is definitely the dominant sound right now.
In which scene?
The heavier scene?
Oh, sorry. Yes, it is.
in the more metal side of Japanese music, hardcore and post-hardcore is where it's at. That's where all the popular bands are right now. That's what's dominating. And until something else comes along, I think we're gonna slowly start seeing bands come out of nowhere with the same kind of sound and start to rise in popularity.
Fucking dead and gone.
Oh.
Well, I mean, you're the resident Visual-kei person, so what do you think about Visual-kei?
It did.
What's dead and gone? What's dead and gone? Because I don't believe that's dead and gone. I believe, like, back in the day, it was much more easier to pinpoint the subcultures within Visual-kei. So, Angura-kei,
I think
Kota-kei, but I think, and Oshada-kei, but I think now it's kind of like, I distinctly remember there was a point, and I wasn't too into it back then, but there was a point in Visual-kei where the visuals kind of just like got turned up to 10. Everything, like the photography got better, the costumes got better, like the style became different. And that for me, I like it blew kind of like, now I realize it just blows my mind because it is completely different. But there are also bands who kind of preserve certain parts of Visual-kei. So you have like Glamskilla,
take your time.
La Film, Miseria, Kiryu, and they're bands who preserve that kind of K or Visual-kei and have been rolling for it for however long. And I mean, it's kind of hard to. I think one point also bands kind of sounded the same, and now they sound distinct.
Yeah, that's a thing. That however much people like to deny, there used to be a sound to Visual-kei. That is not a thing anymore. These days, Visual-kei bands, if they want to preserve the Visual-kei aesthetic, they do that visually. But while I cannot quite pinpoint what the Visual-kei sound was, I don't think it's a thing anymore.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it was like, I can't pinpoint it either, but I understand what you mean.
Like, I cannot put into words what it was, I just know that it's not a thing anymore.
It's a nonchalant sound.
Garden.
Whatever. God. There was like like parts of punk, pop rock. If I think of pop rock, I think of instantly Ankaf, and they had elements of punk as well.
Yeah.
And then there's other like bands like Charlotte.
It depends on which kind of era you're talking about, because there was like a distinct sound for each of the eras, I guess.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, we've definitely entered like a new era. I'm not quite sure when we entered it. It definitely wasn't back in 2009. It must have been
somewhere in the 2010s.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
I feel like you don't really know until it changes again.
Yeah.
Like right when you're like, oh, this is what things are, it changes and you're like, oh, I guess not. Yeah, but then you look back like a couple years later and you're like, yeah, I remember that time when everything was kind of this.
Yeah, that sounds about right, actually.
And right now you get these bands like, I think what it was, Jrock, I think that they have that visual aesthetic. But
Jrock is on point.
The sound is, what is it, hardcore, metalcore? What would you say that
I would say metalcore. Yeah.
Like the sound and the visuals just kind of don't mesh even.
Wait, what do you mean?
What do you mean?
I don't say that I do not like the combo, but I'm also saying that it's a new thing to take that hardcore metalcore sound and slap on this explicit Koteosai aesthetic on it.
I don't know. That's been like I said before.
They have a very distinct kind of like typical Visual-kei style, I guess, like a modern one. And I always thought that those bands look really heavy in terms of
yeah, definitely.
But if we talk about bands like Lead Speak Monsters, for example, you guys know the ones that dressed up like Halloween all year round. I'm always surprised by the kind of music they put out compared to their look.
Definitely.
Because I feel like they kind of just do whatever. And it's in a way that's great because like they're doing whatever, you know?
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying like it's like the first time I saw them like they're dressed up like skeletons and shit, and so you would assume, oh, their sound should be heavy, I guess. Yeah. But then when you listen to their music, it's like really sophisticated.
Like rap rock and.
I mean, I guess you know we're running out of time here, but
sorry.
I guess I have one more question for everyone in a way. Do you think that now more than ever the look doesn't really determine the sound anymore?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's like the thing.
Yeah. I could see a band like one day and be like, you know what, they're gonna, I literally from the image instantly I go, they're gonna be a pop rock band, they're gonna play this kind of music, and that's it. And then sometimes, like I would say 6 out of 10, they surprise me, you know, and I'm like, oh shit, wow, I didn't expect that.
Did you expect Dim Lim?
Oh bloody hell, that's a complete 180. Yeah.
Yeah, but just to conclude what Maso was asking, I don't think the look really is kind of like defining the sound. Even I don't know if that has been the way in the past.
It kind of used to be a thing, but it's not anymore.
Yeah. Okay. I don't believe that is the case right now, at least.
If it's specifically for Visual-kei with this one, because
for Visual-kei it was so very much a thing. I feel like you could literally tell what a band would sound like from their looks alone.
Yeah, because in my opinion, if you look at, you know, I keep mentioning them because they're kind of the biggest ones right now in the heavier scene, like Cold Rain, Crystal Lake, those guys. They definitely look like even Western hardcore bands would.
Yeah, you can tell.
Anyway, we are running a little bit long here, so before we just keep talking about nonsense, let's go on ahead and get out of here. So thank you everyone for joining us. I'm sure now that we have a captive audience with the quarantine, you wouldn't prefer to be anywhere else but here. So,
just captivating.
Yeah, always. So I've been your host, Mazo, with co-host Nexus. And co-host Sis.
Blah, blah.
And special guest, MBT.
Quack, quack.
Alright. We'll see you guys around.